All right, we are live, and I did not give a notice about being live today for Freedom Friday, nor did I really prepare for this particular session. However, I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about something called appreciating freedom. We'll consider that as the topic of discussion. I'm not sure how long this will go for. I'm just going to go ahead and wing it, as I did not necessarily prepare for this session. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this as a topic is because we have just entered into the year 2018. I found that overall 2017 was a pretty good year. But there are certain things that really caught my attention, and they seem to be repeating themselves. And they have to deal with an aspect of there are certain things that really caught my attention. Hang on a second. I need to figure out how I can deal with this chat thing. Anyway, when it comes to freedom, there are certain things that at least I notice from my own observation that go unappreciated. And what do I mean by that exactly? What I mean is that, when I listen to the news or my talk radio, because I'm that entertaining of a guy that I listen to talk radio all day, there's a lot of bad talking our president for those who live in the United States. And if you're listening now live, I want to welcome you to the discussion. But if you listen to this later, I'm hoping that there's still something to be gained from it. There's some good talk about the president as well, and that's good. Sometimes he deserves it. Sometimes he does need to be criticized, and both are valid. But when it comes to actually disrespecting the president, I always seem to be amazed by it. And I'm not trying to bring this up as some sort of political discussion, because it's not a political discussion. It's a discussion of our freedom, of our Second Amendment, if you will. The freedom of speech. And along those lines, one of the things that we have the freedom to do is to criticize how our employee, the President of the United States, and he is our employee, we hired him to run the country, how he does and how he performs. But when actually disrespecting him, I cannot help, and I have not actually heard this as a discussion on TV or on the radio, or even in other streams for that matter. What would it be like if some media person or someone of the general public were to be disrespecting the leader of a monarch country or a socialist country the way that some people do here in the United States? If it's a monarch society, I can almost guarantee that there would be capital punishment of some sort. Because in a monarch society, from my understanding, and I could very well be wrong, I've been wrong before, but in a monarch society, you're programmed to believe a certain way, to live a certain way, and to be happy with it, regardless of whether you agree with it or not, because you automatically are assumed not to disagree with it. That is the life that you are given. And there's no room for debate. You have what you are given, and what you are given is not your own. It belongs to the king, if you will. So to go against this king or this leader is a means of well, tyranny and rebellion. And in some countries, say North Korea, for example, that is punishment of death. I wish I was kidding. So it seems to me that many times there are people who, probably without even taking it into consideration, take our Second Amendment, our freedom, our very freedom, which our first responders and our military fight so hard to allow us to keep. They take advantage of it. I hope that they do it without realizing it. My hope is that they do not know that they're doing it deliberately and still do it anyway. That's my hope. And it's just been something that was on my mind today. I mean, there's a new book that was written called Fire and Fury. I can't remember the guy's name. I think it's Matthew Wolff or something like that. Michael Wolff, who knows? His last name's Wolff, I believe. But it's all about all these accusations about the president, his personality, his lack of intelligence, whatever you want to have, and doesn't name his sources and whatnot. And I'm just thinking to myself, what would happen if he wrote something like that? Let's say, for example, Saddam Hussein. He still ruled the country, and this Mr. Wolff decided to write, and he was a citizen of Saddam Hussein's country. What were to happen if he were to write such a book about Saddam Hussein the same way that he wrote about Trump? I can almost guarantee he'd get the death penalty. I can almost guarantee it. If not, imprisonment and possible torture. Not in America. That doesn't happen. And thank goodness, and it shouldn't happen. Freedom is a God-given right. It's not a political given right. And so I'm grateful that we have the freedom to do this. But the question that I have in mind is, should we really be taking our freedom like this? Not we as in everybody does it with that assumption. But, if I was one who was guilty for doing this, persecuting my president, would it be right for me to be taking my freedom and overextending it to an area where it was never really intended? It's just something that frustrates me. I never did this when it came to presidents that I did not agree with, say Obama, for example. I did not agree with probably 95% of his policies. Yet I didn't bash him for it. I didn't make fun of his speech impediment when he stuttered. I didn't make fun of the difference in the way that he spoke to the people when he was scripted versus non-scripted. Because quite frankly, I'm not bothered by that. I have a high amount of respect for Obama, and I'm sure he's a great guy. I just don't agree with his policies. But I'm not going to deliberately attack him because I disagree with him. And I think it's really unfortunate when things seem to be, and perhaps I'm hoping it's not this way with every single person, but, I see it a lot in the media where we have a president who has different ideas than the media. And so automatically, anything that the president does is a bad thing. It's really unfortunate. And it seems to happen more often than not when it comes to having a Republican president. And to be honest with you, I don't care about Republican, Democrat, whatever. I care about what's best for this country. What makes the most sense to support our constitutional rights. And by constitutional rights, I mean the Constitution which recognizes our God-given rights, our God-given freedom, not what government decides that we get to have. Because the government man does not get to choose what rights we have. The reason why governments do that is because of the fact that, well, we human beings are flawed. We are limited, and we have a lot of room for improvement. I will say that at the very least. And I will be right back just for one moment, and then I will go ahead and get to the live chat. So bear with me just a moment. All right, I am back. My apologies. I had to grab something to drink. Anyway, let's go ahead and go to the live chat. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, I mean, yes, I'm aware that you are not able to see me. The reason why is because I just wanted to, not be on camera. I don't know why. I just chose not to be on camera today. And I apologize if that bothers you. It probably will not be like this very often. But going to the live chat, I want to say hello to Janine, to Martha, to the Greater Bilby, and to Betty and Mary. And I think that's everybody so far. And I want to thank you for joining tonight. Janine says, I find it disgraceful that we disrespect our president. There is a difference between disagreement and disrespect, and we make our own country look bad. And I agree with you 100%. And I want to get into a little bit about that later. Again, I'm not sure how long I'm going to be making this broadcast. It could be for another 15 minutes. It could be for another hour. I'm not sure. I doubt it's going to be for another hour, though. Let's see. And then Martha says freedom of speech and freedom of thought. Yes. And not every country gets it. The Greater Bilby says, Fire and Fury, Michael Wolf. Thank you. I appreciate you looking that up because, well, I've got a $300 laptop and it doesn't multitask very well. But I was thinking about making that change. Not right now because I've been working on my bus because of a separate issue. And perhaps I'll do a live stream of that tomorrow, maybe. I'm not sure. But I purchased something rather expensive, and so I don't really have the money for a new laptop right now. Maybe in a couple of weeks. See, Janine says, I really think that it is extremely admirable that you keep so in tune with what is going on. I think we all need to be like that. And I'll touch a little bit on that as well. But I'm glad you find that to be somewhat admirable. I think most people are more admirable than I am, but thank you anyway. I appreciate that. And Janine also said that freedom adds up to 13, referring to the public display photo that I have up there. Anyway, so I'm bringing this up. I'm bringing up my frustrations, I guess you could say, in this topic of appreciating freedom. And the reason why is because of the fact that we're in a brand new year, 5 days in. And while I really appreciate much of what happened in 2017, we will be covering a little teeny tiny bit of the new tax bill, not from the aspect of politics and whatnot, because again, this is not a political discussion, but because of the fact that we, the people, wanted this, despite what the polls have said. We really have wanted it, a tax reform. I want to talk about a couple of other things as well. But since we're in this brand new year, and there are several things that I do really appreciate that have happened, there are several things that have frustrated me. And history tends to repeat itself because of the fact that it is not often enough that we analyze, that we study the history, analyze it for what it is, the mishaps of the events that have occurred, and really take them into account so that they are not repeated. It doesn't happen often enough. And I'm hoping that 2018 will be one of those years where it will not repeat some of the same mistakes that 2017 brought along. One of these mistakes, I think, was Congress not going along with Trump's agenda for quite a while. I think that's starting to change. Much of that is because I think that Trump's own Republican Party, his own Republican Congress, actually believe the Trump dossier. I think it's ridiculous that they would believe it, but then again, I think there's a difference in the way that people in DC think from the way that us, the hardworking American people, and not to say that government people don't work hard. Perhaps they do, perhaps they don't. I don't know. I've never been in government, so I don't know. But I think they think differently than we do. Us, unfortunately, smaller people. As you know, America was really founded on the concept of small government, big people. And I'm starting to see I'm starting to see the potential of what Trump is doing as far as draining the swamp, as he wanted to do, that he pledged for doing. I see him doing it in a way of not going and rampaging on everything that we have in our government, but letting it fall apart on its own. I think it's a brilliant move. And that's actually one of the things I kind of appreciate. And one thing that I'm really hoping is that the House and the Senate will start to cooperate on a much better basis. We saw this happen with the new tax bill. We really did. The Republicans really pulled through. Did not get any support from the Democrats. Not that we were really expecting it. And what I find interesting is that it's the left is saying that it's only benefiting the rich, and it's costing the middle class more money, and it's theft. Okay. For one thing, the government does not make money. It takes money. And if the government, because of the new tax plan, is for at least 80% of Americans, is forced to take, on average, $1,200 to $1,400 less than they did in 2017. How is that theft? I just don't understand why any of this is necessary. This is one of the consequences of having an agenda. And I know I've talked about this before. When an agenda is involved, that means that there has to be an end to the means. And when there is an end to the means become the end. In other words, to take the philosophy of that and explain it in real life terms, when there is a motive involved, in other words, one ideology is the only ideology. My idea, let's say that I think that socialism is the right idea. And by the way, I don't, for those who are not aware. I'm very much conservative in my thoughts. But if I want socialism to be the way of the United States and someone else disagrees with me, I'm going to do whatever it takes, even if I agree with something that the president is doing, but it's the fact that he's doing it. So I'm going to knock it down as much as I possibly can. And that will justify what I'm doing so I can bring about socialism. It is so unstable to have that kind of thought process. I don't say this to try to be negative. I say it because it's so disappointing. And I know that nobody in politics is ever going to listen to this live stream. I know this. But I think by talking about this, I'm actually expressing some of the things that each and every one of you is possibly thinking. Since the Russian investigation is not going very well, there is a shift in the way that things are being presented. And it's all to support one thing: an agenda. It's much like taking scripture out of context in order to fit someone's theology. It's just, to me, it's like the equivalent of that. Because trust me, I am no theologian. I am no profession. I am no expert when it comes to the way the government works. But I do think I have at least a small portion of what I like to call common sense. And unfortunately, it seems like the more that liberalism is shoved down America's throat, the less common sense becomes common. I mean, it's really, I've actually shared this with a few of my friends. If I were to ever get married, now that means I'd have to actually be dating somebody. But if I were to ever get married, I don't think I'd ever actually get a marriage certificate. And the reason why, well, for one thing, it's my right not to, whether the government says it is or not. But the reason why is because if government doesn't even know what marriage is, what's the point in even turning in a slip? What, to get an extra tax bracket? Well, it doesn't really work that way either, because if you really think about it, if you look at it, two incomes going through their tax processes separately, after you do all your itemizing and all that, even actually with a new tax plan, you don't even have to do that much. It all equals out to be about the same. It really does. I've done the math. The only way it might actually equal out one way or another differently is when there are kids involved, or if there's a business and whatnot, but that's a little bit different. I don't know if it's retaliating. I don't know if it's some sort of way to get vengeance on the United States, which I don't think that is. But to me, it's just common sense. Why should I be doing something when you don't recognize what it is that I'm doing? Let's go back to the live chat before I go any further into that rant. Let's see. Janine says, we wasted a lot of money, could get away with anything, took a lot of vacations. We did do a lot of good, though. I really took interest in my cases in one. I think that's, oh, they did finally decide to drop the investigation. Well, they didn't no, they did not. No, not that I've heard of anyway. What's happening, referring to the Mueller investigation on Trump, he's just going a different direction. He's going into Mueller is investigating business Trump's businesses from 15 years ago at this point, trying to find more stuff to discover collusion with Russia. Think I'm kidding? I'm not. I wish I was. And as Janine brilliantly points out, it is extremely unconstitutional. You have to have a reason. You have to have an actual crime in order to put together a special investigation. There is no evidence for Russian collusion. Therefore, the entire Mueller investigation, at least from what I understand legally, is unconstitutional. It's in fact illegal to be having it. But they'll have it because of the fact that, well, unfortunately, I see the conservative side of the United States doesn't quite have the backbone in politics. But we won't have to go into that too much. Let's see, what else do we have here? The Greater Bilby says, Australia do apparently follow many different channels in Facebook, Twitter, etc. I was thinking of that too, taxation without representation. Oh, and apparently, thanks to the Greater Bilby, I did not know this, couples taxation is separate here in Australia now. Well, that's great. I think that's the way it should be. I really do. I think that's the way it should be for everybody. Keep your taxes separate. But, who am I to say anything? In fact, honestly, let's just have the fixed tax laws. Let's just have that. You pay sales tax on everything, and that's what you pay taxes on. That brings me to speaking of Australia. This doesn't have anything to do with Australia, but I had a rather fruitful conversation with someone in India not too long ago. And this particular person, she's 22 years old, in college, and she actually asked me about my opinion about Trump and if I was a core supporter of Trump. And I mentioned to her that no, I'm not a particular Trump supporter. I am an America supporter. And I am grateful that I get the privilege to agree and support Trump on many of his policies because they are what I consider as pro-America. When something he does I don't agree with, then I can disagree with him and maybe scold him a little bit in a very respectful way. His tweets don't bother me. I don't think they're necessary a lot of the times, but they don't bother me. Sometimes I find some humor in them. And we went into much more discussion because, well, she lives in India and therefore a very socialist area. And come to find out that aside from, there's a bridge in understanding about capitalism versus socialism because she doesn't live in a capitalist country. So naturally, I don't expect her to understand capitalism for what its real potential is. But come to find out, and it was my suspicion all along, that most people in other countries that are fair-minded people they love Trump. That's my automatic assumption. Because I know that most people don't have the privilege of the type of freedom that we do here in America. There are a lot of countries that do. Not necessarily the same type of freedom, but they do have a certain amount of freedom. But come to find out that this young lady was actually rather conservative. Even though she had the background of socialism, so therefore she did support socialism to a degree. When I started to kind of really break down the milestones into separate categories, we came to agree that social services are absolutely okay. I am all for social services. What we came to also agree with is that government should not be supplying social services. And then I pointed out to her that she was a lot more conservative than she actually knew before. It was a fascinating discussion. And it just really encourages me that I think if a level-minded conversation were to happen across the board, not necessarily, I mean, across the board, I mean, I can only really speak for America, really. If we were to just gather ideologies from all fruits of this country, and we were to have a level-minded conversation, I think that the majority would probably agree. And this is dealing with the whole topic of compassion. Believe me, I love compassion. I do. But sometimes what we humans consider as compassion may actually be harm. And I'm not even just necessarily talking about things like, the more harmful services of compassion, say abortion, for example, where like 70 million babies have been murdered over the last, 10 years, something like that. More people than, more murders than deaths by all wars combined in the United States. And that's just in 10 years. Never mind that. I'm just talking about some of the simpler things. Say, for example, going into a clinic to have a tooth work done because you have a toothache, but you can't afford it. Because, perhaps you don't have the best job in the world. I totally get it. Or maybe you do have a really nice job, but for whatever reason, your living expenses are higher than what they could be. So you need to go to the clinic. Well, there are plenty of nonprofit clinics out there. You don't have to have government telling you, well, you need to buy this, which, by the way, thankfully, the new tax reform removed the requirement for having health care. But anyway, the government does not need to tell you that you need to buy something that you cannot afford and you cannot use. So, but you have to have it anyway, because otherwise you'll be penalized for it. The government doesn't need to regulate. Well, I'm a man, but I might decide that I need to become a woman, so I better force myself to include sex change surgery under my healthcare insurance, which, by the way, is a government regulation, or at least it was before the tax reform. I don't need that. I also don't need to have end-of-life insurance. When government's involved in social services become more expensive. And that, ladies and gentlemen, causes our freedom to be more minuscule. You make things more expensive, it takes away our freedom. When the government regulates something, it narrows the potential for open market competition. I'm also grateful that 2017 brought over 2 million jobs. Very grateful for that. So with the new tax bill, we get to save on average about $1,400. Media says, oh, only $1,400? That's it? That's all you can give the middle class? Well, how much money did Obama give us? Not a penny. And yet we're getting hammered because, well, $1,400 is just not a lot of money. I'm sorry, but 120 extra dollars a month, I'll take it. I'll just take it. The bigger government is, the smaller the people. The smaller the people, the less freedom we really have. And freedom, ladies and gentlemen, is the essential for a prosperous life and a prosperous opportunity to truly know God for who he is, his very character, and the life that we were meant to have with him. That's what freedom is about. And my hope is that this freedom, which our beloved military, our police officers, our firefighters, our emergency response, they all defend, is something that will be taken a little bit more into consideration for 2018. I also want to wish each and every one of you a belated Happy New Year. I know I haven't exactly been all that active lately on YouTube. And I'll go into a little bit more on why that is with the bus, give you guys a little update. I was going to do a bus tour of my winter setup, but that winter setup is no longer there. But anyway, so my hope in appreciating freedom is that we will take it a little bit more seriously. And by we, I don't necessarily mean us conservatives or even people overseas, which may or may not share the same opportunity for freedom. I mean the people that don't take freedom into consideration the way that they should. And I can go on and on about it. I can go on about the NFL, why they are actually losing numbers. I can go on about many things. A shooting that just happened recently. Oh, and a guy that has been deported 5 times and most likely will be deported a 6th time just to come back to the United States illegally. All because, immigration regulation? We can't have that. Ladies and gentlemen, let's really, truly appreciate our freedom. And I am convinced that each and every one of you listening to me right now, whether it's during this live stream or it's later when I'm probably working on the bus, or if I am meeting up with a few friends, or whatever I might be doing, you're listening to this after its live session. I'm convinced that each and every one of you truly does appreciate freedom for what it really is. I have no doubt in my mind. I guess you can say I'm just venting, because we haven't had Freedom Friday for what, 2 weeks? Maybe it was just a week. I don't know. I've lost track of time. I think it's 2 weeks though. Let's go back to the live chat real quick, and then I've got to take off, unfortunately. So let's see if I can figure out where I left off. Let's see, Janine says, we have a balance of the scales, justice and governmental body, supposedly, and that is not putting that into action. Well, our balance is very much agenda-based, unfortunately. Sometimes an agenda is a good thing, but not always. Let's see. The Greater Bilby says, Trump's tweets remind me of Prince Philip's outspoken nature over the decades. Well, Trump's tweets are simply from his own words to get his perspective out there because the media is not listening. Well, that's not exactly his words. I'm improvising, but that's what he said. That's why he tweets. Oh, and the Great Ability said something has been announced about half an hour ago about charges against the investigator of the Trump dossier. Not the investigator. It was against the author of the dossier. And yeah, I'm aware of that one. I had a big grin on my face when I heard that on talk radio earlier. I was very pleased. But it's still something, it's still up for grabs. It's not official yet. Janine says, I want the government involved in my life as low as possible, and that's the way it should be. I would agree with you 100%. That is the way it should be. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and take off from here, but I want to thank each and every one of you again for joining in today, especially considering that I did not make any mention of having this. So thank you. Happy New Year, everyone. And I'm working on a couple of videos for my Houseless on Wheels channel. So some stuff for you to look forward to very soon. Anyway, thank you for watching. Take care. Love others as you love yourself. And I'll see you next time.